Hey there, folks. It's 7:19 a.m., May 6th. And, 2022 years from something. I just returned from Manistee, Michigan. I live in Michigan now. I was raised in Indiana. I was raised actually in the Tri-County area. That's what they call the area of Indiana. I'm on Google Maps here. That's what they call the area of Indiana. That essentially spans the border from Illinois to Michigan. And it runs along the lake. So there is riparian lake land in all three of the counties. Over here is a thin county called Lake. Next to it is a thin county called Porter, that's where I grew up. It was in Porter County. And if we go down here, this town right here, Couts. I grew up pretty far south of Couts, near Wheatfield. There is a very long river that it starts up south of South Bend, Indiana, at Springs, and it becomes the Kankakee River. It is mostly a mud bottom river in Indiana. I grew up near the Kankakee. There is a big story about the Kankakee. I have a book on it. I still haven't gotten to. Because I know a lot of it's going to be bogus information that I'm going to have to weed through like every other book I read. There's simply no relaxed reading when you know that basically everything we've been told to one degree or another is a lie. But yeah, anyways, so around Illinois, it starts to become more bedrock. The bottom, the Kankakee, it does widen quite a bit, even when we get to Moments. But yeah, something was done to it because there was a certain amount of dredging that was done, and I definitely want to look into it, and I'm hoping to plan a trip actually down to Couts so I can see some of the sites I never paid attention to before. There is, as I said, I don't know the extent that the dredging caused. There is a bayou area and other very interesting areas of the Kankakee. It has a lot of influence over the land all around it, because one thing I remember is at certain times of the year this would flood immensely. We would be driving as just little kids out to our house, which was pretty far south of this crossroads, which is 8 and 49. That's sort of Couts proper. And we lived pretty far out here, a bit north of the Kankakee, right in this area here. So we'd be driving out one way or another, maybe back from our church building, the little cult we went to in Wheatfield. And I'd be looking in the side of the roads, and these fields would be so flooded, I thought we were driving through oceans, you know. So it still has it's a very big effect and a very big floodplain for what seems to not be a giant river, at least running through here. It's decent size. Definitely decent. I never, as a kid and a teenager, we used to go out and jump in all kinds of rivers. There are abandoned railroad bridges all over the place around the back roads of Couts and in between Couts and La Crosse and the other towns. And yeah, we just go. There was one creek, the creek that ran right by our house that I was in until I was 11. It was called Crooked Creek, which I believe, yes, it's another tributary onto the Kankakee, but it has its own tributaries, and there are no, not drain. I'm sorry. I always forget the words. Irrigation ditches. There is a network everywhere, all through here. Some are very large, and you have to figure when were those dug and by whom. So much we don't really consider the infrastructure that exists in the United States. And I know that every day when we get up, there is a whole day of now the U.S. population, many, many millions of people, far over 100 million. I don't know what it was last time I checked, but we have people that are working on infrastructure all the time, putting in new infrastructure, maintaining the old infrastructure. That is true, but based on the numbers, as we go back further and further, we see that the numbers were so low population-wise, and when we pay attention to the amount of infrastructure that was put in, or that they claimed was put in, especially in the 1800s, or from the, let's say, the late 1700s to the 1800s, when they say the Industrial Revolution was, the nature of it, the fact that, again, they say they needed all these orphan trains to ship all these children out to mostly the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and then across the Mississippi after that, because they needed so many bodies. But we're also being told at this time that they're building these magnificent buildings. And not long after this, many dams. And then, of course, we have the structures that I'm finding that I ignored most of my life, and I never got an answer. And I think I remember even asking maybe my dad or somebody what they were, because we would see them so often. And I don't know if I ever got a good answer. I don't know if he ever told me it's a low-head dam or what its purpose was or anything, because, and here's why, not a shot at him necessarily, but we're not really taught about them. I don't remember being taught about them in any class in school, on any field trip, on any vacation. And now that I've become so interested in these low-head dams because of how peculiar they are, as far as when you look at them and you think about what their purpose is, and just thoughtfully, if you're thoughtfully attentive to their design, what they can do, what they're said to be for in various places, and the stories always change, doesn't add up. So when I went up to Manistee, so up the coast of Michigan, and I'm just going to take you a little bit just here on Google Earth, up the coast of Michigan. And you'll see that Michigan, for one thing, Michigan has a lot of relatively large and oftentimes quite long rivers that lead to Lake Michigan. And there are, if you look at it, especially too, if you look at the old maps, and when you start traveling in Michigan, and you get... especially when you get further and further north, it becomes more and more and more pronounced. But not just north. If you go more to central Michigan, you'll see how pronounced it is too. And it's not as much on like Google Maps here. The topography. So the topography in the middle of Michigan, which is more pronounced on, let's say, older, what would appear to be hand-drawn maps, higher, of course, all through the center here, in the sense of hills. I don't think I would call anything that I've seen mountainous, but especially, I live near Grand Rapids. So, this is, I suppose you would say, west central Michigan. And you'll start seeing them even when you go east of Grand Rapids. A lot of pronounced hills. And then as you travel north, they get more and more and more and more pronounced. Plus, there's just a lot of springs in Michigan. And there are beautiful springs up in the Upper Peninsula. So where I traveled to was, I guess it would be in car highway driving, because we went up 131, which just kind of skirts the lake here, okay? We went up to Manistee. So we've got Grand Haven, and I'm going to go by these ports because they're so interesting. I'll start further north than Saugatuck, but I don't know why they're not. Here we go. So you can start with Holland. Holland is west and a little bit south, and you'll notice we've got this is the Grand River. Now the Grand River is right near me, and it's really interesting, and it runs right through Grand Rapids, and there are a number of low-head dams in the Grand River right through its main run through the older portion, I would guess, because of the types of buildings that are there, of Grand Rapids. And when it comes out here to Holland, you'll notice we have this large bay, or what they'll call a lake, right in here, okay? And it seems pinched right here. I don't know if that is natural or not, because here's what's odd about it. And this can be natural, sure, because I haven't looked into it enough to know for sure. But you can understand just how valuable all these little port towns and port cities and port areas are when all of them have these harbors. All of them got these harbors. So that's Port Sheldon. And we go up a little bit, and you'll notice this just happens again and again and again. And here is, I'm sorry, I said down in Holland was the Grand River. I apologize. That's not the Grand River. You see which river that one is, because that's not the one that runs through. So I'm sorry. That's the Makatawa runs through Holland. My apologies. No, the Grand River, its mouth is actually up here north of Port Sheldon. And it has this pretty enormous, again, what they call a lake. But what you can tell, and based on the history of the Grand River, there was a lot of engineering done to this Grand River, a lot of diverting, perhaps dredging. You can see that it just looks like a, what should I say? I mean, especially up in this area where this, and right here, we have more of a port in this area. And then this is what they would call essentially like a lake. And they have nasty names for this lake because they say it's very dirty, which it might just be mucky, because all around here, and even up from Grand Haven all the way to Hudsonville, you'll see it outside of Hudsonville and Zeeland, muck fields, just muck fields all over the place where they grow all manner of vegetables. The population in these areas is heavily Dutch. Dutch are known for growing a lot of vegetables, specific kinds of vegetables, dairy farms, doing river and water engineering. The Dutch are known for that. And here we have another lake with what looks to be an inlet or outlet to Lake Michigan. Not a major thing. But when we get up to, for instance, Muskegon, very big harbor again, and you got to think, over and over and over on these rivers, we've got these gigantic harbors. And, I mean, they're great for commerce. The Great Lakes are, just when you think about it, if we get the idea of what we have come to think about nations, you know, we view the United States as a nation and then Canada as a nation. But if you go back further, and there are just so many. Look, I'm just passing so many of these ports, many of them just created by a river flow. And then, wouldn't you know it, I mean, luckily we've got this huge reservoir of water which acts as a fantastic port. And look at this one. What do we have here? You know, is this all entirely natural? Does this have an outlet? I'm not sure, because I haven't spent a lot of time looking into this. I'm simply talking about what I've observed on a recent trip and giving you some background to it. So this is Manistee. Okay, this is, I stayed near here, but we spent a lot of our time all around Manistee, and a couple of the things that we did was, there is this Manistee River, and sometimes they actually call it the Big Manistee River, and it's a good-sized river. And it might have a lot more flow and be even more impressive if it wasn't for two micro dams, micro hydroelectric dams up the river. Both of them are creating their own impound lake. Pretty big impound lakes, or if you want to call them reservoirs. You know, they are the large body of water created by this dam. And of course, these bodies of water stretch the land and fill in all of the lowland up until where the river or the land naturally rises enough to where the river's normal flow can then catch up again. Now, I remember the first time I went looking for these dams, that we went to, it was a little difficult. Now, I found one of them, and this one right here, based on its bend, I think that right there might be tippy. Yeah, and here's the other one, and it is the Hodenpile. We've got the tippy and the Hodenpile. The tippy is here, and it creates a very large impound lake. And most of the time it's great because you can spot these impound lakes, oftentimes just because you'll see the pinch. If you pay really close attention, you'll see the river on the one side, and you'll see that pinch that the dam causes, and then you'll have this huge lake area behind it. Now you start looking around the eastern United States, east of the Mississippi. So if I say eastern, I'm always thinking of the Mississippi. East of the Mississippi, you'll see tons of these impound lakes all over the place. So the funny thing is, so you look into these dams, the Tippy and the Hodenpile, and both of them are what's classified as micro dams. Micro dams are classified as such because they can generate under 100 kilowatts power, which I believe I think the larger of the two is the Tippy. It's a, what is it, 20,000? Try to get the info here on Wikipedia. That's funny. Environmental, the hydro spillway chamber at Tippy is used by about 24,600 bats during the summer for roosting, swarming in the fall, and hibernation in the winter. That's lovely. I'm sure that creates a great... So their turbine says the electric power produced by the water turbines, 20,000 kilowatts. So it's 1/5 of the max that a micro hydroelectric needs to be considered micro. And this one, the Hodenpile, which I figure it produced less, it does 17,000 kilowatts. It's its max, about 48 million kilowatt hours per year. Enough electricity to serve the annual power needs of about 5,000 Michigan households. So if you look at kilowatts, I found this to be pretty common average. If you look at the kilowatts that they claim to be able to produce, less than a third of the homes. So if they produce like this, 17,000 kilowatts, it serves about 5,000 homes per year, which I don't think that's a lot. You look at the Hoover Dam, they say it, 1 million or so. And I guess when you figure for population, how many people are going to be on average in a home, maybe about, what should we say, 3 or 4. So maybe about 20,000 people, 5,000 homes. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Now, I'm not sure if I should play some of the weirder things about this video. I found this, this is, a totally establishment kind of video on hydroelectric dams. Now, unfortunately, I don't understand power as well as I'd like to, but I understand the basics of power and the basics of, like, water-generated power. So water is a great source of power. That's why, you can still find water mills. And you don't actually even need a dam to produce a lot of power in a water mill, because you can put the mill wheel directly in the river, and just the flow of the river, you can produce a pretty good amount of water through the turbine, which, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Yeah, you could run certain machinery that essentially runs on a spin or other sorts of mechanical movements just off of the movement of that one wheel that the water is moving. Okay, so yeah, you could run a pretty big grist mill off that single wheel that's being powered by the movement of the water. And it's got buckets. Those act as your resistor, just like the blades in a windmill would act as your resistor. It turns, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially based on reduction. If you reduce, whether we're talking about, and it really just comes down to, you can do it two ways. You can reduce the spin you have of the larger wheel in the first place to smaller and smaller wheels. They can be fanned out, in a sense, if you have a number of smaller, like direct mechanical, because we're talking about direct energy. Before we get into the, like for instance, in a power station where they're converting direct current or direct energy into alternating current, which is, by the way, the alternating current is the kind of power that's being created at these places that has the most dangerous potential for causing nerve problems to the people working around it, causing potential cancer and other problems to people along the way. It's that alternating current. It's the alternating current. And transformers, no matter what size they are, that are transforming current, they also have a lot of radiation problems and effects that come with them. Okay, so we're just talking about direct power, let's say a dynamo, to just simplify it, although I know there are a lot of ways to mechanically transfer the energy that you're gaining in either the fall of water or the flow of water, the blowing of air. There's all different kinds of ways we can harness energy. Talking about water now. And the thing is, you know, I've seen people that actually create very small systems to run a turbine, and they power their house. Very small. And they're just utilizing the downhill run of a small amount of water. And they're catching that water, and they reduce that water and bring it into a very, very small space, because as you reduce that water, you build force, and you build force, and you build force, and you can run that turbine very hard, very fast. It can create a lot of energy. The faster and harder something runs, it creates a lot of energy. And I have to say that there certainly is, I'm sure there are, you know, numbers that you can plug in and show why that reduction is so important with the production of energy, because we're talking about energy, whether it doesn't really matter, I suppose, if we're looking at the principle of energy creation, whether we're talking about energy in this sense or energy as far as somebody's energy. Right now I am expelling energy, but if I was doing it very quickly, waving my arms around, stomping my feet, and turning around in my chair, that would be far more energy. So I think the same principle applies. Anyways, so I do have some photos here and maybe a couple of videos that I took at these micro hydroelectric dams along the Manistee River, basically in upper West Michigan. The Manistee River that, of course, goes out to the lake. Now, starting here with this picture, I'll just put it full screen. These were the pictures I started taking when we were at Tippy Dam. Tippy Dam is further downstream, so it is closer to the Manistee city, harbor, and Lake Michigan than Hodenpile. So we'll start with that. So without any more delay, let me get to what I think are the two co-stars of this video. And then hopefully I'll make another video with some other stars. They are not dams or water related. This is going down to the Tippy Dam. So if you come from the south side like we did, this is the interesting thing about the Manistee River that I noticed as we approached it from you'd have to approach it from different angles. If you wanted to get to the other side, you could not get there because all of the area of the hydroelectric dam, it's all closed off. So you can't even walk across. They don't even have places. You have to drive a very long distance to get to another approach on the other side. So with the Tippy, your approaches are either south side or the north side. We came through the south side, and there was a huge amount of steps that you have to descend, and then unfortunately reascend. And I'm not kidding when I say a lot. To get down to it from the south approach. The northern, and I think this is important in a lot of these cases, where we find these huge impound lakes. So to the north is what seems to be a more planular topography. I don't want to downplay the topography of Michigan. Michigan does have some areas of very extreme topography, and especially around, for instance, this river. Now, I took some pictures as we went down of things that I thought were interesting. Now, first off, coming down to this river, you will notice ascending these steps, and I think I have a picture or two of some of the steps, there's runoff everywhere from this higher ground. So this river is really deep down because there are water channels, just even natural ones, that are just running off all over the place, okay? Now this was one thing I thought was interesting, and this is a very large concrete slab here, and I do not know what is underneath it. We do have some piping that seems to be extending out from this area. For what purposes, I do not know, but this is quite large, what I noticed here. This big concrete slab and a lot of space beneath it. Now, from the stairs, it would be very difficult and probably quite dangerous, especially with all the water that was running off on this day specifically, and this is very steep, very treacherous up this hill, to try to get in there, and I didn't have a flashlight or anything else to where I could go up, which you could. So there's no fences that are keeping you back. You could go up, shine lights in here, and see what we've got. Because I don't know. That's why I took a picture of it. Not sure. Go on to the next picture. Here's it just from another angle. And look, we've got more. See these spaces? All around here. It makes me wonder. Really makes me wonder about that. Now here was my first decent view of the sluices, these high sluices of this dam. Really interesting that they're up this high when you consider what you'll be shown if they show you how hydroelectric dams work. And perhaps I'm not reading this right, but those definitely look like upper sluices to me. Do they have something lower? I'm not sure because I don't have any exact diagrams of this particular dam. Let's see. Go on a little bit here. Now, this is star number 2, or number 1 of the whole show. These buildings. These types of buildings and types of structures are very interesting. You will find them, of course, a lot of them are part of a lot of what they call these micro hydroelectric dams. Buildings that are very odd in the sense that they don't necessarily seem to fit everything else that's going on around them. If you look at a lot of the components that have been put in to facilitate a hydroelectric dam, which I guess in the simplest terms just literally consists of a barrier with sluices that can be opened or closed, channels with turbines to be turned at the bottom in their most basic form, okay? So you do have to wonder when you see the newer dams that they've created, like Hoover or other sorts of impound dams like that, the necessity of these very large rectangular structures, very long windows. Oftentimes, a lot of these have been blocked up in many of these buildings, look like they've been repurposed in certain ways. The detail is very nice. These windows actually have these nice keystone details in them. They have this dental molding all around the tops of the buildings, and they absolutely stand in contrast to what seems to be a lot of other later add-ons all around them. If there's, like in this instance, you have all your sluices over here, and this building doesn't even seem to be part of the whole system of the water flowing down and out, but just over here. However, for some reason, this whole building is still part of the whole embankment that's holding back the water. If you go to, I posted on my Obery Project Panoply group, there was somebody recorded a drone flight from downstream to upstream, and you'll see even when you get to the back of this building that they have new add-ons that completely obscure from the upper part of the building. So you can't really tell whether this building was once standing far out of the water and there were windows just like this, perhaps, on the other side, or any windows that are below the water level. Because over and over again on these structures, I find that there seems to be portions of it that are more recent, and they typically obscure the other side of it, so it's hard for us to tell exactly what was going on there in the first place. Now here is the other big star of this video. This is a Low-Head Dam. Now they've done some things to this Low-Head Dam, and I do want to address a couple things about it. This Low-Head Dam at the tippy, they have come in and they have placed a lot of boulders all up in front of this thing. Well, the reason they did that is, for one thing, they could say, well, it makes it easier for the fish to get up in here that are trying to swim upstream and spawn, but once they get to the dam, they're pretty screwed. That's one of the things that these hydroelectric dams do. They stop the fish from getting up where they want to get to. So it's really a bad excuse to say the boulders were in there just to help the fish. What, to get into this area so that sportsmen can come out and fish them? Mainly what happens is when you put boulders in front of one of these Low-Head dams, the effect that these boulders have is they stop the boil. The boil is the most dangerous thing about these Low-Head dams. It is massively dangerous. You can find some videos, there are videos that local news did on the Susquehanna, because they have a number of Low-Head dams along the Susquehanna, and the Susquehanna is a big river. The Low-Head dams that they put in, I mean, in some places they're like, what? Half mile more wide. Really big structures. And these OG-shaped Low-Head dams, what you don't notice is, because the water is rolling up over them, just how wide they are. These Low-Head dams, even on small rivers, are so wide that they can just bring heavy equipment out with jackhammers on it when they disassemble these dams, and just jackhammer it, because they're so wide they can just roll right up on it and start disassembling it. So the boil is created by the water falling very with a lot of pressure, and what's coming straight over the crest of this OG-shaped Low-Head dam, the water is now going down deep. It's coming up and it's rolling back. And there is going to be this constant system of the water rolling like this. Now, only a certain amount of the water then will escape, and it will escape from underneath. So what they say is, anyone gets caught in this, if you can, essentially drag yourself along the bottom. If you can grab anything and just grab your way along the bottom as far as you can, because you're going to see, even as far out as here, that water is still turbulent, still kind of wants to go back in. So this whole area is called the boil. This is the, I believe they call it the hydraulic drop. Boom. And it's a lot of energy. And what's happening is it's creating so much energy when it drops down that it's creating this roll right back. This is the boil. Now, the funny thing you'll notice about these low-head dams, they tell you all the stories about why they created them, but you'll notice something. If they created them for pleasure, for irrigation, if they created them for anything like that, you have to wonder, why did they create these walls, which you'll typically find, unless they've been torn out to one degree or another, like on this side, they actually have sheet pile, and who knows what they had here before they put in these large wooden stairs that actually go down in all these different areas so people can come down here now and fish. But typically what you'll see on most of them is walls that have been constructed either out of boulders and mortar or just straight up block, really old block. And what they do is they create a barrier. Now this whole deck, this platform here, this was put in later. This is a later addition. What you'll mostly find with the ones that haven't facilitated something like this is the whole reason they put the boulders in was to stop that boil, so that fishermen can actually bring their boats right up close and fish without being worried about being pulled into the hydraulic drop, because it will. That boil will pull them right into that drop, and that drop will go right into their boat, no matter what they do or want or don't want. It'll go right into their boat. It will tip their boat. They will get caught in the boil and they will die if they don't get out. They can't get out by swimming. It's too strong. It is too strong. It will pull them right back to the drop. When they get into the drop, it will force them under, bring them up here, pull them right back in, and they'll just keep doing that until they're exhausted. The way that most of these are built is they have these baffles on either side so that nobody can exit. They're designed specifically so that no one can exit. If they were built for the reasons that so many people would say, you would think that they would have natural exits. And again, here you can tell that they probably tore out what wall was in here and they put up this sheet pile so that all of this water wouldn't just be spilling all over the place over here. So they must have taken out another baffle that was in here and made it to where people could enjoy this spot. So now it's touristy. So yeah, boulders can do that, and that's what they do at a lot of these spots is they put in these I went too far. They put in those boulders. I actually took a quick video too, which I'll play, of this Low-Head Dam. And if these boulders weren't here, you would see. So I want to say this is the video where I got the fishermen rolling up because I thought it was so crazy that they were boating right up to this, which, I mean, not really because of all the boulders. It's just something you don't see every day. If there weren't all the boulders here, nobody other than, let's say, rescue people who were training to rescue, it's just so damn dangerous. But the reason they were able to is if you look, there's a huge cluster of boulders in this far area that create this baffle, like they really couldn't get past them into the hydraulic drop. That's the real dangerous place. You can actually be in here if you're not going to be pulled into that drop. Let me see if this is the right video. Okay, right there. You see that? That is probably where they tore out a lot of what was existing in this area. That was probably a walled baffle so that somebody could not exit. And then they just stuck this sheet pile in so that they could basically create these beach areas, which are quite small, where, you know, anyone can ascend down here and can fish. So this isn't the right video. Let me go on. I did record another video because a boat came up, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are they doing? I got to get this on video. And it's interesting because you can see that, yeah, they can create a relatively safe space by putting those boulders in. So these are just pictures of a lot of the water drainage. Here it is. These guys came speeding up, and I thought, what in the heck are they doing? These are just fishermen. They came right up. Now they stayed right to this. There's this huge pile of boulders over here. And there are some right in front, and they were smart enough to only come just so far, and they dropped anchor right there. And they wanted to keep themselves away from that. They couldn't get up to the hydraulic drop, but they were smart enough to stay back at least this far from it. So you go on for now. Here again, you can tell. This is, to me, this is something that is absolutely after the fact. This sheet pile they're putting in here just to manage what they had here, because obviously it would appear that whatever was here they tore out at a certain point. Another one of the drainage channels, just natural drainage channels. And this is, I mean, this is, the south side is just a really steep embankment. Really interesting rocks that we would find around here. Like these ones. Are they even rocks? You know, and I'm sorry for being ignorant on some of this stuff because, you know, I don't know rocks. I'm not a mineralogist. But the way that some of these look and some of the other rocks that we found, to me, they looked like something concretious. Okay? That's what this looked like. And this was absolutely buried. We don't even know how big this was. Okay? It looked more like a mix than an actual naturally occurring rock or mineral. There it is again. Okay? Is it some type of footer for something? Something left behind? We would find pieces like this all over the place. Look at things like these imprints. Just doesn't look entirely natural. I know what water can do. I get it. But just a little bit odd, the kinds of stones we would find around. More pictures of the structure and these side sluices. Very big impound lake. Huge natural earthworks to impound this lake. Not even as big as the Hodenpile. The Hodenpile is almost 3/4 of a mile long. And it is enormous. And you got to wonder, from when they say they were building these dams, the Tippy was said to have been built in 1918, and then the Hodenpile, 1925. That's still pretty early for a hell of a lot of work to be done. And when you start looking into the costs, what they say the cost was to build these in the first place, they're huge. You know, when you start comparing them to their benefits. And all right, let me just address the Low-Head Dam, because there's another Low-Head Dam in front of the Hodenpile, and I'll get to that. What I want to address about it is this. Now, they'll say, if you watch a video on how hydroelectric dams work, they'll say many hydroelectric dams actually have a reservoir in the front of them. And here's why. Because they say then what they can do is they can use the same power they just generated through that drop, that energetic hydraulic drop. They've generated all this electricity. Then what they're going to do is they're going to use a lot of that electricity to pump water back up into the headwater lake, so that they'll have it for peak times, because of course they don't store energy. But if you look at these low-head dams and how much water they actually retain, it just doesn't make sense. If you wanted a reservoir, you would want to create a large area and you would want to dredge down. So you had this very large pool. And how large could it really be? How much water could that reservoir, especially if you look at these, now you saw the one there at the tippy, and then you're going to see how much smaller the one is at the Hodenpile, and you got to think, whoa, wait a minute. I'm looking at the size of these impound lakes, which are gigantic. There's no way they could pump enough water. They can't say, oh, those low-head dams, they're for a reservoir to pump water back up in there. It would matter. It would not matter. The amount of water that could actually be stored before that low-head dam wouldn't matter when you consider the size of these impound lakes that are being held behind these dams. Okay? Maybe in some cases that matters. And I'm still not sure I understand why you'd want to use all of that energy to pump water back up in there, because almost no matter what kind of dam we're talking about, whether we're talking about the very largest class or the mini class, they're holding back these huge bodies of water. I can't see how any sort of reservoir in front of it would make a damn bit of difference, or that the idea of pumping it all the way back in there and all the energy that it would take to do that is justifiable. Who pays for that? We pay for that? Yes, we do. And I also like to bring up the fact that these places, like in Michigan, it's Consumers Energy. That's who holds the sway over all this energy. They own these places. They can fence off all of them, not let you get around. You can't check out the buildings. You can't go to certain parts so you can get good views of them and try to check them out. It's entirely private, but they're using and vastly changing public space and rivers. I don't understand everything about them yet. I'm sorry. So these are these are the concrete stairs that go down part of the way. Then you have to get to these wooden decks, which have various stairs then down from them. Lots of steep topography here. And we did go to the other side of Tippy because I wanted good clear photos of these buildings. Now in this case, we have a lot of this sheet pile in here. And I'm going to tell you this, I don't want to sound real ignorant, but I don't know if I can help it or not. I really don't know how long this sheet pile can last. When I say that, I guess what I mean by that is if you're using the right materials, it would seem to me that these sheet piles can last and do their job a hell of a long time. And based on when they say that these were put in, and I'm not able to inspect these to see how much wear they have. Obviously, they're not concerned about constantly blasting and painting these or anything. And we have all of these areas of this structure that really look after the fact. Even the lower part of the front here looks essentially blocked in. If I could get to these portions of the building, which I can't, you can't. There's certain fencing in certain places, and you just can't get up here and start taking pictures and start examining, what parts look like alterations down the road. Now, in these cases, they left these big old windows, but I would be interested in whether they actually give tours. Now, you can see, look at this, see where the window level is? Now follow this back. Okay, now the water level would be right in this area. Okay, and we could see that based on the water level, it would be far too close to the windows. Even if the water was way down here, which it can't be because you have your sluices up here, the water level is going to be higher. Huge lake, you would never need to pump back up into this lake. And the problem is, if you go back around, you have this whole huge section of what's been built in concrete that's covering the whole backwater portion of this building. Even when drones go over it, can't see it. So there's a wide shot. Tippy Dam. Everything's over here. All this is over here. And if they said they needed some kind of reservoir, I would think they could have it right here, as far as this one is concerned. And when you get a feeling of how big that impound lake is, you really do have to ask yourself how they would even need a reservoir, based on how, and these are, I put this at the end, 1 second. So I had to pause it because I had a huge amount of pictures of these big, beautiful structures in the town of Manistee that I took a lot of photos of that I didn't want to get mixed up. And so anyways, now we're at the Hodenpile Dam. Hodenpile Dam's essentially even smaller than Tippy. Hodenpile is a lot different than the Tippy, but we go back to having, first off, this, what seems to be a much older existing rectangular structure here, and a lot of portions of it that would appear to be added on, like this front part here, the what would seem to be the areas where they would say that the turbines are kept in. In this case, they don't have side sluices. That they would have to be sluices right in here, and I'd love to see the inside of this building too, because I have to wonder where the sluices are. You go on top of this the impound, all of this earth pile, which is huge. At the Hodenpile, just the earthworks that they put in to hold back the lake, they're huge. They're almost about 3/4 of a mile long. From one side to the other, and you can see that in the overhead map. So again, this is the impound lake that the Tippy Dam creates. You would never need to pump water back up into here for any reason, ever. Even if the sluices were just a couple inches below the water line, there's so much impounded water at water level all the way until the river, it gets up to, high enough land to where the river levels out. You never need to. So if we go up here to where the Hodenpile is, you'll see all along here, you see all that? So from here, where it rounds the corner, this is all where they've built up all of this earth to impound all of this. Now, what's interesting about this is, again, what I said about the topography. On one side, it might be a steep embankment, but on the other side, there's a lot of flat level land. And you have to wonder some things about these low-head dams, where they're located, the fact that even when you don't have hydroelectric structures, you will oftentimes have these very old bridges, remnants of old bridges, sometimes remnants of old buildings, rectangular buildings, sometimes that will be on the shore, near there, and a bridge upwater from this low-head dam. And all I can see as far as the use of this low-head dam is stopping boats, watercraft from going up river, because that's how you will enter somebody's territory, by going up river. I see no other purpose for them than killing and stopping and killing. That's what they do best. That is literally, when you look at a low-head dam, it is a perfect killing machine on the river. It's perfect. And when you look into all the concrete that has to go into one of these concrete that has to go into these low-head dams, and start thinking about the engineering and the construction of it and how long that must have taken. Because you'd have to at least construct a cofferdam for a portion of it. And when you get into like these super large rivers like the Susquehanna, and there's low-head dams on even bigger rivers than that. How many cofferdams would you have to build through piling and You know, they speculate that before they used sheet piling, they used various kinds of like lumber piling to create these cofferdams, which would be pretty damn leaky, and you'd have to pump and pump and pump and pump. You want to keep cofferdams as dry as you can because of the kind of work that you're doing in there. And you'd like your concrete to cure. Now, some of these dams, when they take them apart, they find piling near them, in them, to one side of them. So you got to figure maybe they would have left it in some cases. It's hard to say exactly how they engineered these because the amount of information on low-head dams is pretty bad. And they seem to keep mixing them up with weirs, and weirs do not serve the same purpose as low-head dams do. Weirs are completely different. Some low-head dams seem like they were altered, too, after the fact. And that some people use them like a weir, or, you know, with sluices on top of them, which look like they might have been constructed in the first place to where they could actually take poles and you could put in temporary sluices or take them out. Maybe. And that's usually on the smaller ones that are on smaller creeks, which would act in different ways and used for different reasons. Because there are sometimes low-head dams on smaller creeks, but these would be creeks that not too many people would probably be using for travel by boat. And I can imagine ones like that which aren't designed in the same way as these big river low-head dams. They're different. They're more like steps. Might be for very different purposes. When you look at the impound lake for the Hodenpile Dam, this covers a ton of ground. And that's the important thing, is if these low-head dams served a certain defensive purpose, then we might find structures very near to it. You can see when you look at this that the river probably bent right here and might have traveled around close to one of these shores, and I'm assuming maybe it bent and was near this shore, and we've got all of this whole area where there could have been, who knows what, guard stations? Would this have been areas where, if they put in a low-head dam and it was defensive, would this have been an area that they would have made for change-offs? Like, let's say somebody pulls a sort of barge or a cargo boat full of grains or other things from up in these areas with all of these fields and agriculture going on, and they're just pulling their grains down the river to get them to Michigan so that they can be shipped to, let's say, other parts of the other lakes where perhaps you have more ore mining going on or other valuable things and they want to trade with them. And in Michigan, like I said, they're more than grains. I mean, you grow a lot of grains in Illinois and Indiana. You grow some grains in Michigan, but Michigan is so full of various types of vegetable and other agricultural farming and things like that. So people shipping all of their products up the river, they would have points, perhaps, where they would put in stoppers for these low-head dams. You would get to that point, all for security, because you can, even in rivers like this, if the low-head dams and other ways of blocking them off were not there, these rivers would be a lot bigger. And you could sail pretty big-sized craft up these rivers, crafts that are full of people, men, guns, whatever. Who knows? This is speculation, I know that is, but when I look at low-head dams and what use they have, which is as killers, stoppers and killers, I don't know what else to think. So there could have been structures all around here, or ones that were torn down, and the earthworks, the footings, and other things, like maybe we were seeing remnants of at the other dam that I took pictures of, you can just bury with water. I find it interesting that I started reading a book called Cherokee Archaeology, which is mainly tracking a lot of the items that were pulled out of the ground around the Blue Ridge Mountains in the area of South Carolina, Tennessee. And the guy at the front of the book, when he's talking about the history of the archaeology in that area, he was saying that a number of archaeological expeditions and he did not elaborate, and I hope he does later in the book, were done in, and he names these reservoirs, which of course, if he's naming reservoirs, he's talking about waters that are impounded by a dam. Why are they doing all this archaeology in the reservoir? Got to think about these things. What was there? And why are they putting the dams in these places? So just to give you a few pictures, and then I'll wrap this up because I'm at an hour now. Of the Hodenpile, that's the main building, of course, all fenced off. Now they tell you that the security on power plants, it's so necessary because they say somebody with bad intentions, if they got near one of these plants and tried to blow it up, because that's literally what they'll tell you. When I lived in Michigan City, Indiana, there's a large NIPSCO plant. NIPSCO basically has sway over Northwest Indiana for power. Theirs are mostly coal fire plants, and you'll see these huge train loads full of coal coming to the plants, big cooling towers. They'll tell you that security is so that, let's say, a terrorist or a bad actor or something couldn't come in there, blow the plant up, and it would cause bedlam and chaos because they would throw out the power for this whole grid. But the thing is, they don't really guard these substations very well, except for some chain link fences. And if I understand everything correctly, it would seem that it's just as easy to blow up one of these substations and stop the whole circuit from flowing. Easier, in fact, than the plants themselves. So I'm sorry, I don't see the huge difference, the need of security to keep people out, to keep people away. Don't want people knowing too much. I mean, even people I've talked to who work at these power plants, they are very compartmentalized. They do not understand the entire workings of the plants, the way the energy is made, why it's made, why so much is made at certain times, how they have to dump, how much energy they dump. And given the prices that they charge us, and they just dump so much. They dump so much. Those cooling towers always going off. They're just dumping so much energy. So this was just a view of the retainer. And you have to walk up a very big staircase to get to the top, the crest of these retaining walls. So you got to figure how deep this lake is. Very, very deep. And this wall is very, very long. And when you consider excavation, if you've seen excavation and building up of land, even for like an exit on a highway or something, it takes a long, long time to move the earth in place, to compact the earth or whatever layers they might be using in a huge, huge retaining mound like this. I'd hate to sound super ignorant, but I would say that the top of this from the bottom of the land down here, it's got to be 100 feet. It's enormous. And if you have 100 feet at the crest, you have to go out in order for it to be stable. What? From the center of the crest out for it to be stable? At least what, a 45? So big. If we're looking at 45, that's 12, 12. 100 up, 100 out on this side, 100 out on this side, 200-foot base. That's a lot. That is so much fill for you to excavate from wherever. I don't even care if it was down here along this area, right next to it. That's fine. You still have to dig that all up, move it into place, and you have to compact all of it. You can't have this loose. This has to be very strong. Almost 3/4 of a mile. And it's all that high, 3/4 of a mile. Just for that. And I just want to show you a bit of the shots I got, because we did ascend all the way down to the little bit of shoreline that we get near here. Here's a couple of different shots of this building. Again, it looks like this building itself, this rectangular building itself, is separate from everything they've added on. That new concrete here, add-on, alteration, existing, older, sure seems like it to me. And the way that that all of this, the framing is attached to this building, and the ways and the fact that the piers and everything up here, different kind of concrete, different looking. It just doesn't It doesn't add up to me. Just doesn't add up. It all looks very weird when I look at it. It doesn't look like it was planned out this way. It looks like a lot of these things were just added on and it was repurposed, that it was something else in the first place. Now you can see in this photo, and I did take a short video so you could understand that this is a low-head. And you can see they don't have boulders down on this one. Okay? They have this line right here that's supposed to stop you from coming too close because it's a low-head. Low-heads are super dangerous. They're killers. Here's my video. Now notice in this video, and that we're kind of far away so you can't hear how loud. These low-heads can be pretty loud because it's a significant hydraulic drop, you know, and from the water level here to the water level there, it's probably about 4 feet. That's significant. And again, this is why I speculate on these sheet pile baffles, you know, where they added in over what was already here, just because of if they repurpose this, they would have all of this fill, you know, were there already walls that were built, and all you need for a low-head dam to be effective is walls that are just a bit higher than the low-head dam itself, okay? And they really could have come in, and you see how these are tipped. When they get to this low-head dam, the sheet piling is tipped, as if it was just put in, maybe it was channeled around the low-head dam. And I know my little screen is in the way, so let's see. It's really hard to say because they don't let you get too close. Here you see the sheet piling around. So they literally could have just, and see, it seems like it's up right here. It's not even sheet piling. I mean, it is, but the way it looks weird. That's all I'm saying. All fenced off. You can only get to this little teeny landing right here, and then the very small landing where we were. Now the river looks much more shallow here, and you have to figure, if you drive around here, you'll be going up and down bridges over this Manistee River all over the place, and they're very big bridges. And if you come to a bridge over the Manistee, you might come to 2 bridges or 3 bridges, and you have to because a lot of it's just sort of wetland. Now that could just be the floodplain, or it could be portions of the river that have actually dried up into more wetlands as opposed to riverlands because of them putting in these huge retainers that are making for these now hydroelectrics. And just I took a few other photos besides that. I found a nice large carcass of a crawdad. It was a pretty big carcass too. And now we're at the Manistee General Store and their beaver garbage can, which I thought was fantastic. The Manistee General Store is pretty awesome. Oh, no, it's the Dublin. That's not Manistee. I apologize. This is Dublin, Michigan. They have a general store there. It's gigantic. General store, like everything you could want there. Hardware, home stuff, groceries. Odd groceries, you know, the kinds that are really great, you know, really boutique little items from near and far. And they make jerky there. And they have more jerky than you could even imagine. And the quality of it's very, very high. Excellent stuff. I can't recommend it enough. If you get near Dublin, Michigan, definitely go to the Dublin General Store, even just for the jerky. It's a pretty awesome place. So I'll wrap this one up just right there with that. And again, wait, before I do, because I just wanted to look how close the Low-Head Dam is to this structure. And there's no way that they could ever try to tell you that that Low-Head Dam was simply for water reservoir or impounding so they could pump back up into this lake. By the way, the lake is just under this crest. They could never have any need to pump water back up in there. Part of my point. So, see you guys next time.